Picture this: Victor Wembanyama, 7 feet 4 inches of the most unique basketball talent the NBA has ever produced, drives to the basket, gets his legs pulled out from under him and hits the hardwood face first. No hands down, no protection, just gravity, velocity in the floor. The arena goes silent, his teammates freeze, and the medical staff sprint onto the court. This was not a normal basketball fall. This was not something you see and forget by halftime. The replays circulated instantly, and every doctor, analyst, and basketball fan watching said the same thing: that looked catastrophic. Here at Hoop Action TV, we cover the NBA the way it deserves to be covered: deep, honest, and complete. We are closing in on 1,500 subscribers, and if you have been watching our breakdowns, you already know we do not do surface-level takes. Subscribe right now, hit that like button, drop a comment, and share this video, because this story is one of the most significant injury situations the league has seen in years, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Now let us go back to where the story actually begins, because to understand how devastating Tuesday night was, you have to understand exactly where Victor Wembanyama stood just 48 hours before that fall. Game 1 of the 2026 NBA playoffs between the San Antonio Spurs and the Portland Trail Blazers was a statement. Wembanyama walked into that arena as a 21-year-old, now 22, in his first ever postseason game, and he was absolutely dominant. 35 points, 13 of 21 from the field, 5 of 6 from three-point range. Those are not just good numbers, those are historic numbers. Wembanyama broke Tim Duncan's franchise record for points in a playoff debut, surpassing the 32 points Duncan scored in his own first postseason game. He became the first player in NBA history to score 35 or more points while also hitting 5 or more three-pointers in a postseason debut. He dropped 21 points in the first half alone, a record in the play-by-play era, and he did all of this with Tim Duncan and David Robinson watching courtside. Two of the greatest Spurs of all time, sitting in the building watching their franchise's future announce himself to the entire basketball world. After the game, when reporters asked Wembanyama about the historic performance, he said, "It's not that much, the job isn't done. 21 years old, 35 points, a franchise record, a historic debut." And his response was essentially, "We still have work to do." Then the very next day, Monday, the NBA announced that Wembanyama had been named Defensive Player of the Year. Unanimously, the youngest player ever to win the award. The first unanimous winner in the history of the Defensive Player of the Year award. Not a close vote, not a consensus, unanimous. The statistical reality behind that award tells the full story. The Spurs' net rating with Wembanyama on the floor was +15. Without him, it dropped to near zero. As one widely circulated stat put it, Spurs net rating with Wemby +15, without Wemby negative. That's the series right there. That single data point captures his impact more efficiently than any highlight reel ever could. He was also a legitimate MVP finalist heading into these playoffs. 2 days before Game 2, Wembanyama was standing at the absolute peak of his young career. Unanimous DPOY, MVP finalist, franchise record holder, playoff debut for the ages. Everything was pointing upward. Then came Tuesday night, 8 minutes and 57 seconds left in the second quarter of Game 2. Wembanyama drives toward the basket. Drew Holiday executes what is known as a pull-the-chair move, a completely legal defensive technique where a defender retreats as the offensive player commits to driving contact, leaving them with no one to fall into. It happens dozens of times every season. It is one of the oldest tricks in basketball defense. But here is what made this moment different. Here is what separated this fall from every other pull-the-chair play you have ever seen. Wembanyama on his way down was still trying to make a play. He was attempting to pass the ball, and because he was focused on that pass, because his instincts were still in basketball mode, his hands never came down to protect his face. That was the detail that changed everything. 7-foot 4-inch human being hitting the floor face first from full height at full driving velocity with zero hand protection. The physics of that are, as one medical expert described, profoundly unforgiving. His face made contact with the hardwood at high velocity. His head bounced multiple times. His hands, which should have broken the fall, were near his head, and multiple observers noted he appeared briefly unconscious in the moment of impact. He writhed on the court. He tried to rise and immediately fell back down. He sat with his head between his legs while teammates and medical staff surrounded him. Eventually, he jogged carefully to the locker room, with Spurs trainer Will Sevening following closely. The reaction online was immediate. Rohi74, that fall looked 10x worse than a normal player, one fan wrote. Another, now that replay is hard to watch, hope Wemby is good man. These were not dramatic reactions, these were accurate ones. The height factor is a real medical variable, not just a visual one. When a player of Wembanyama's stature falls, the distance traveled before impact is significantly greater than a player of average NBA height. Greater distance means greater velocity at the point of impact. Greater velocity means greater force applied to the skull, the jaw, and the brain. The physics are profoundly unforgiving. That is not a dramatic statement, it is biomechanics. The pull-the-chair is legal. It will stay legal, but when a 7-foot 4-inch player falls without breaking it, the consequences are categorically different from when a 6-foot 2-inch guard does the same thing. And then the doctors started talking, and that is when things got genuinely alarming. The medical analysis that followed the fall was not reassuring. Multiple sports medicine experts with specific NBA and NFL experience weighed in, and they were not mincing words. Dr. Evan Jeff, an NBA and NFL injury insider who has analyzed dozens of high-profile sports injuries, identified two immediate concerns, not one. A concussion, which everyone expected, and a potential orbital or jaw fracture, which most fans were not thinking about. Two separate injuries, happening simultaneously, each one serious on its own. Dr. Brian Sutterer, who conducted a frame-by-frame video breakdown of the fall, flagged something even more specific and more alarming. He identified what he described as ataxia, a neurological term for the loss of full body movement control. When Wembanyama tried to stand up and immediately fell back down, when he stumbled, when he sat with his head between his legs, those were not simply the reactions of a man in pain. Those were neurological red flags. You could literally see the ataxia when Wemby tried to stand. That's not something you rush back from, as one observer put it. Dr. Sutterer's key warning was specific. We absolutely need to keep an eye out for a facial fracture, jaw, mandible because of how hard he landed. Dr. Ali Safi, a neuro-ICU medical director, explained the concussion spectrum as it applies to this type of impact. Concussions range from mild to severe, and the variables that determine where on that spectrum a patient falls include the force of impact, the angle, and whether the head struck a hard surface directly. Wembanyama's fall checked every box for a high-severity impact event. The symptoms to monitor included nausea, vomiting, cognitive fogginess, and persistent headaches, and critically, the harder the initial impact, the longer the window of potential risk. Now here is the part that is most important to understand. A concussion and a jaw or mandible fracture have very different recovery timelines. A concussion managed through proper protocol typically requires 7 to 10 days before a player can return to game action. That is serious but manageable in the context of a playoff series. A jaw fracture or mandible fracture is a completely different situation. Recovery from that type of injury can take weeks to months, depending on the severity and whether surgical intervention is required. And here is what makes diagnosis particularly complicated in this specific case. The concussion itself can mask the pain signals from a potential facial fracture. When your brain has been impacted, your body's normal pain communication is disrupted. That means a fracture could be present and not immediately apparent, making imaging tests critical before any return-to-play decision can be made. Spurs need to be very careful here, one medical analyst wrote. That was the consensus across the board. Careful, thorough, no shortcuts. The NBA concussion protocol is structured. It is not optional, it is not negotiable, and it moves in stages that cannot be compressed regardless of the stakes involved. When a player is removed from the game with a suspected concussion, they go immediately to a quiet space for a neurological evaluation by the team's medical staff. No return to play is permitted for a minimum of 48 hours from the time of injury. After that 48-hour window closes, the player must move through a multi-step return-to-play process. Stationary bike work, then jogging, then on-court skill work, then non-contact practice, then full practice. And at the conclusion of that process, they must be cleared by a league-appointed neurological physician who is independent of the team's medical staff. The team cannot simply decide a player is ready. The league's doctor has to sign off. Now apply that math to the series schedule. The injury occurred Tuesday night. The 48-hour window did not close until Thursday evening at the earliest. Game 3 was scheduled for Friday in Portland. That gap between when the 48-hour window closed and when Game 3 tipped off was extraordinarily narrow. Even if imaging showed no fracture and symptoms began improving immediately, moving through the full multi-step protocol in that window was always going to be a challenge. Game 4 is Sunday in Portland. Game 5 is the following Tuesday, back in San Antonio. Game 6 and 7, if the series extends, come in rapid succession after that. The expert projections were largely consistent. Dr. Evan Jeff projected a 7 to 10 day return window, which would likely mean Wembanyama misses play until Game 5 at the earliest. ESPN's Michael Wilbon cited a 9-day average recovery for concussions of this type, landing on the same conclusion, out for Games 3 and 4. Stephen A. Smith said plainly, "I don't think Wemby will be back Friday. I think Portland wins Friday, goes up 2-1, forces Wemby back for Game 4. Chris Mad Dog Russo added, "I'd be shocked if he plays Friday. Game 4 is the key. Down 3-1, winning 3 in a row, 1 on the road, that's not easy." Then came the Shams Charania update, which provided a small amount of measured optimism. Wembanyama did cardio work on Wednesday. His symptoms did not worsen overnight. He was traveling with the team to Portland. He was listed as questionable for Game 3. Return timeline likely falls in 5 to 10 day window depending on protocol clearance, was the assessment circulating from league sources. Questionable, not out, not available, questionable, which in NBA playoff injury reporting means do not assume anything and watch for updates right up until tip-off. The net rating numbers have already been mentioned, but they deserve to be examined fully because they tell a story that no highlight package can tell. With Wembanyama on the floor, Spurs' offensive rating of 120.5, defensive rating of 103.6. That is elite two-way basketball. Without him, offensive rating drops to 114.3, defensive rating rises to 113.7. The difference on the defensive end alone is 10 full points per 100 possessions. In NBA analytics, a difference of 3 to 4 points per 100 possessions separates a playoff team from a championship contender. A difference of 10 is not a gap, it is a canyon. Game 2 proved that in real time. The Spurs led by 14 points in the fourth quarter after Wembanyama had already gone to the locker room. 14 points. And they still lost 106-103. Portland outscored San Antonio in that final stretch with Scoot Henderson, who finished with 31 points, exploiting the complete absence of rim protection that Wembanyama provides. So who steps into that void? The honest answer is that no one steps fully into it, because no one in this league replicates what Wembanyama does. But the Spurs have options, and those options matter. Luke Kornet is the most credible alternative. At 7 feet tall and 250 pounds, Kornet is an intelligent positional defender who understands angles and positioning. In Game 2, he put up 10 points and 9 rebounds in 28 minutes. Over the regular season, Kornet averaged 11.2 points, 10.4 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks per 36 minutes, numbers that make him a legitimate contributor, not simply a placeholder. He is not Wembanyama. But he is a real NBA center who can defend the rim at a reasonable level. Carter Bryant, a 6'6" forward used as a small ball center option, brings energy and athleticism, but he was 14 in just 12 minutes of Game 2. The size simply does not match the assignment against Portland's interior players. Mason Plumlee, Bismack Biyombo, and Kelly Olynyk provide additional depth options, all of whom were used sparingly. None of them change the fundamental reality of what the Spurs are missing. That reality shifts the burden decisively to the perimeter. De'Aaron Fox, who put up 37 points against Portland earlier this regular season without Wembanyama, has to be the primary engine. Stephon Castle shot just 11 of 33 from the field across the first 2 games and needs to find his rhythm. Dylan Harper has flashed genuine brilliance, but has also shown the inconsistencies of a rookie navigating his first playoff experience. Julian Champagny has been efficient, 4 of 6 from three-point range, and needs increased volume if the Spurs are going to generate enough offense. Three-point shooting is also a significant variable. The Spurs shot 45% from 3 in Game 1, that dropped to 29% in Game 2. Return to something close to the Game 1 efficiency is not optional. It is necessary for this team to compete in Portland. Devin Vassell spoke honestly after Game 2. "We know what Vic brings. It's going to be next man up. That's a huge void to fill. There's one piece of real evidence that the Spurs can compete without him." Over the course of the regular season, San Antonio went 12 wins and 6 losses in 18 games without Wembanyama. That is a winning record. It is not a fluke. This roster in certain matchups has demonstrated it can win without its best player. Whether those regular season results translate to a playoff environment against a team that now knows exactly what the Spurs look like without their star, that is the real question. One additional debate has been circulating since the injury. Pull the chair is legal, but when a 74 guy falls like that, league might need to look at player safety. That conversation is legitimate and will continue beyond this series, but it will not change anything before this series ends. There are 3 distinct scenarios in front of the San Antonio Spurs right now, and each one leads to a fundamentally different version of how the 2026 NBA playoffs unfold. Scenario 1, clean imaging. No fracture, no mandible injury. Concussion only. In this scenario, Wembanyama moves through protocol. His symptoms stabilize and improve, and he is realistically available for Game 4 or Game 5. The series is absolutely winnable. If the Spurs can split Games 3 and 4 in Portland, or even drop both while keeping the games close and bring Wembanyama back for Game 5 in San Antonio, the momentum dynamic shifts entirely in their favor. Scenario 2, slow symptom recovery. The concussion clears on imaging, but the neurological symptoms persist longer than the standard timeline. Fogginess, persistent headaches, sensitivity to light. In this scenario, Wembanyama may miss through Game 6 or even Game 7. The Spurs would need to win multiple road games in Portland without their best player. That is possible, but it requires near-perfect performances from Fox, Castle, Harper, and the supporting cast. Scenario 3, facial or jaw fracture confirmed. This is the one that doctors flagged as a serious possibility. If imaging reveals a mandible fracture, Wembanyama's timeline is not measured in days, it is measured in weeks. As one medical expert noted, 2 weeks puts you well past the end of a first-round series. In this scenario, the 2026 Spurs playoff run ends without their star player finishing it, not because of a basketball play in the traditional sense, because of a fall. ESPN's Michael Wilbon was direct about the championship implications. He does not believe the Spurs win a title this year regardless of how the series ends, but he placed that in a broader historical context. Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, every player who eventually built a dynasty went through a playoff heartbreak first. First-round exit due to injury, if that is what happens, does not define Wembanyama's career. It becomes a chapter in it. The counterpoint, of course, is Tim Duncan, who joined the Spurs, stepped into David Robinson's frontcourt, and won a championship in his very first NBA season. Dynasties do not always require heartbreak first. Sometimes they just start. If Spurs lose this series without Wemby, this becomes one of the biggest what-if playoff stories in years, was a sentiment circulating widely among fans and analysts. That framing is accurate. This series, depending on how the medical results come back, has the potential to be remembered as one of the most consequential injury moments in recent playoff history. Victor Wembanyama is 22 years old. That number matters more than any net rating, any series record, any playoff storyline. He is 22 years old with a realistic projection of 15 or more years of NBA basketball ahead of him if he stays healthy, if his body holds up, and if the people responsible for his care make the right decisions at the right moments. The pressure to return quickly will be real. It always is. This is the playoffs. This is a franchise that has not been in this position in years. This is a fan base that is watching their future play out in real time. The pressure on a competitive 22-year-old to say he is fine, to say he is ready to push through is immense. It should be resisted, completely. A medical expert covering this situation stated it plainly. Risking anything is not worthwhile, especially with head injuries. Head injuries are categorically different from ankle sprains, hamstring strains, or even broken fingers. The brain does not operate on the same recovery logic as muscle tissue or bone. Returning too quickly from a concussion, especially one with the neurological signs that doctors observed in Wembanyama's immediate reaction, creates real risk of second impact syndrome, which occurs when a second concussive event happens before the brain has fully recovered from the first. The consequences of second impact syndrome are severe and long-lasting in ways that go far beyond basketball. Consider the timeline of the 48 hours before that fall. Unanimous Defensive Player of the Year, MVP finalist, franchise scoring record in a playoff debut. He was at the absolute peak of his young career on Monday. By Tuesday night, he was sitting in a quiet room in a medical facility, head between his legs, taking neurological tests. His teammate Devin Vassell said what the entire locker room was thinking. We just want him to be good. Everybody just wants him to be good. That is the correct priority, not the series outcome. Not the playoff seeding implications, not the narrative around whether the Spurs can compete without him. Victor Wembanyama's health, his long-term, full health, is the only thing that matters right now. A first-round series will come and go. A career built on a healthy, fully functioning brain and body lasts a generation. The fans who are tracking his status, refreshing injury reports, watching for updates, the best possible outcome from all of this is that the imaging comes back clean, the protocol is followed completely, and Wembanyama returns to the court only when it is genuinely safe for him to do so. Take your time, Wemby. We ride with the squad no matter what, one Spurs fan wrote online. Another, prayers up for Wembanyama, future of the league, health, playoffs always. Both of those sentiments get it exactly right. We are waiting on test results. We are waiting to find out whether one routine pull-the-chair move, a play that happens dozens of times every NBA season, stole the 2026 NBA playoffs of its most compelling and important figure. The answer to that question depends on what the imaging shows, how his symptoms progress through the protocol, and whether the medical staff and the organization make the right decisions when the pressure is at its highest. What is not in question is this: Victor Wembanyama, at 22 years old, is already one of the most extraordinary players this league has produced. Unanimous DPOY, MVP finalist, 35 points in a playoff debut that broke Tim Duncan's record. A net rating differential that makes him, statistically, one of the most impactful players in basketball. None of that disappears because of a fallen Game 2 of a first-round series. The only variable that matters right now is whether he is safe. Everything else, the standings, the series, the storylines, is secondary. Now here's what we want to know from you. Do you think the Spurs can win this series without Wembanyama? And if you think he plays in Game 3, drop your reasoning in the comments because that takes some conviction. Share this video with anyone who follows the NBA. This is one of those stories that is developing by the hour, and we will be back with updates the moment anything new breaks on his status. If you enjoy real NBA breakdowns like this, you will like what is coming next.